When a 9-year-old walked into court to fight his billionaire father and defend his mother, no one took him seriously, until he destroyed everything with a single recording. "I am my mother's legal representative." The words rang through the courtroom like lightning cracking in a silent sky, stopping Judge Harrison mid-turn of a page. He looked up over his glasses, visibly startled. 9-year-old David Thompson stood upright, his tone slicing through the quiet atmosphere of the family courtroom like a blade. His mother, Janet, stood beside him, eyes wide with both admiration and fear. On the other side of the room, Robert Wellington III, David's biological father, nearly spit out his coffee. "I'm sorry, young man, but this is a hearing for adults," the judge said with a forced calm, studying the small boy in glasses who had dared interrupt a high-stakes custody trial. "I understand that, Your Honor," David replied confidently. "But I also know that under Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the United States has ratified, I have the right to share my opinion on issues that directly involve me." He pushed his glasses up and opened a dog-eared school notebook. "And this definitely involves me." A heavy silence fell across the room. Robert Wellington, a prominent figure in Chicago's real estate world, wearing a tailored suit worth more than Janet made in 6 months, turned sharply toward his attorneys, looking as if he wanted to strangle them. No one had prepared to be challenged by a child quoting international law. Janet Thompson had worked 60-hour weeks as a nursing assistant, raising David without support. In the 8 years since Robert had learned he was a father, he had visited David just 4 times, always bringing lavish gifts, but never real presents. Now, suddenly, he wanted to take the boy away. "Your Honor," Robert's attorney, Dr. Mitchell, cut in, tugging nervously at his tie. "This is highly unorthodox. The child doesn't have legal standing to." David faced him calmly, speaking with such composure that adults in the room shifted in discomfort. "If this is really about what's best for me, then my voice should be heard, not dismissed." Robert leaned toward Dr. Mitchell to whisper something, but David wasn't done. He opened his notebook with care. "Your Honor, I've prepared a full statement on why I should stay with my mom, including documentation that reveals the petitioner's actual reasons for filing custody." He stopped, then looked Robert directly in the eye. "Reasons that I believe the court will find very enlightening." Robert's face drained of color. What had the boy discovered? And how had a child shown up more prepared than his own high-priced legal team? In that silent courtroom, everyone sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. A child holding truth powerful enough to unravel lies that built fortunes. If this story of courage and sharp mind touches you, don't forget to subscribe, because what David was about to say would not only change his life, but how the legal system listens to children forever. Dr. Mitchell straightened, trying to regain control like any seasoned lawyer would. "Your Honor, while the boy's passion is admirable, this court deals with complex family law that requires proper legal representation." "Then why didn't anyone provide me one?" David asked, shutting his notebook with a sharp clap that echoed around the room. In 8 months of this process, nobody thought it necessary to hear from the one person most affected by the decision. Robert squirmed slightly. The calm with which the boy carried himself unsettled him. David didn't look the least bit shaken by the courtroom, the lawyers, or even his biological father. Janet glanced at her son, her heart full of both pride and fear. For weeks, David had been returning home with unusual books from the library, volumes on law, children's rights, and court cases. She assumed it was just curiosity. She never realized he was preparing for a legal fight. "Your Honor," Dr. Mitchell continued, "Mr. Wellington is seeking custody out of genuine concern for the child's well-being. Ms. Thompson, despite her good intentions, lacks the financial means to offer the academic and social growth that someone of David's talent deserves." "That's interesting," David murmured, flipping through his pages again. "Genuine concern, huh?" He found a section and looked up. "Your Honor, would it be all right if I shared a few facts about this so-called concern?" Judge Harrison, a veteran of hundreds of custody trials, had never experienced a case like this. On one hand, protocol demanded formality. On the other, this child was showing more poise and preparation than many adult litigants. "David," Janet whispered, "maybe let the lawyers handle it." "What lawyers, Mom?" he said gently. "We can't afford someone like Dr. Mitchell. So if I don't speak, no one will." Robert finally found his voice. David, son, I understand this is all confusing. Don't call me son. The words were cold and final, and made multiple adults in the room flinch. In 9 years, you've seen me 4 times. 2 birthdays, both late. 1 Christmas visit, squeezed between other plans. And once, when you needed a photo with a child for a feel-good media article. Robert opened his mouth to speak, but David kept going. The last time you visited, 6 months ago, you stayed 15 minutes. Just enough time to insult our furniture, complain about the hospital smell on my mom, and say I had potential if I got a better education. He adjusted his glasses again. Then 2 weeks later, you filed for custody. Dr. Mitchell whispered urgently to Robert, but David hadn't finished. Your Honor, I've done research on my biological father. I found out he lost a major lawsuit recently, that his 3rd wife is filing for a contested divorce. And I found something really important about a trust set up by my late grandmother. Robert's skin turned pale. How had this child found such deep information? Things not even all his attorneys knew. David flipped to another page in his notebook and smiled. Not like a child, but like someone who knew he was holding all the cards. But before we get into inheritance and financial gain, he said, closing the notebook again, let's talk about why a man who never wanted to be a father suddenly developed such strong parental instincts. Robert was now visibly perspiring, and his legal team looked completely blindsided. None of them had expected a child to be this informed. What had David found in those hours at the library? And how had he uncovered secrets that seasoned investigators had missed? Judge Harrison leaned forward, intrigued. In over 3 decades on the bench, he'd never witnessed a child command a courtroom like this. David, he said, you mentioned evidence. What kind of proof do you have? David pushed up his glasses again, a move that had become his courtroom signature. Your Honor, ever since I learned about this case, I've been spending Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Central Public Library. And what exactly were you researching? Dr. Mitchell asked, almost mockingly. Public records, archived news, business documents, court filings from Mr. Wellington's past. David opened a new section of his notebook. Ms. Rodriguez, the head librarian, has a degree in information science. She taught me how to navigate legal databases. Janet stared in disbelief. For months, David had said he was studying for a special project. Now she realized that project was to protect their family. This is outrageous, Robert finally burst out. A kid digging into my private affairs like some kind of investigator? All public data, sir, David replied without flinching. Every bit of it legal, open to any U.S. citizen. Ms. Rodriguez had realized it right away. This wasn't curiosity, it was desperation in disguise. That boy comes in every week like clockwork, she had told Janet on a call the week before. He reads legal cases like comic books. He's learning faster than most adults. David moved forward smoothly. I discovered that Mr. Wellington has been sued 3 times in the past 18 months. He lost a $2.3 million case with his former partners. His current wife is divorcing him, citing financial dishonesty. And David flipped another page. I found a trust fund from my late grandmother, Eleanor Wellington. It contains $1.7 million, but it's only accessible if my father gets full custody of me. The courtroom froze. She passed away when I was 2. For 7 years, Mr. Wellington never told her about me, never brought me to meet her, never mentioned her grandson. Janet remembered it clearly. Robert had once said, "My family doesn't need to know about it," referring to their child as it. But once Eleanor discovered David's existence through a private investigator, something David found in her estate records, she set up the fund with strict conditions. David paused for impact. She made sure the money would be used for my education and care, but only if my father proved genuine commitment through custody. If he never did, it would all go to me at 18. The logic was brutal. After ignoring his son for 9 years, Robert had no claim to the money, unless he forced a custody arrangement now. But there's one thing my grandmother didn't predict, David said, closing the notebook once more. She couldn't have known that her son would go on to ruin small family businesses through unethical practices. Dr. Mitchell stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is going off the rails. The child is making wild claims. I can back it all up. David reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder. I have 17 lawsuit copies, Cases where Wellington Industries bought out small businesses under financial stress using inside info from bank contacts. Janet sat frozen, watching her son transform a custody trial into an expose. One of those families owned a bakery, the Santos family. Mr. Wellington found out they were 3 months behind on payments due to their son's medical emergency, and took their shop. "This has nothing to do with custody," Robert shouted. "It has everything to do with it," David replied, "because it shows a pattern, a man who exploits the vulnerable for profit. And now he's trying to exploit his own son." Judge Harrison reviewed the documents, his expression darkening. "Where did you obtain these records, David?" "From public court databases, newspapers, state and corporation filings." Ms. Rodriguez always said, "Truth is usually public. You just have to look." Dr. Mitchell gave one final attempt. "Even if some of this were accurate, my client still offers superior education opportunities." David smiled, not kindly, strategically. "On that note," he said, opening a final notebook section, "I'd like to share Mr. Wellington's actual education plans for me." At that moment, Robert understood. His son wasn't just smart. He was dangerous. And he had discovered things not even his lawyers knew. What did David uncover? And how had a child managed to build a stronger case, with nothing but a library and a mentor? The entire courtroom waited, breathless, for the final blow. "About education," David repeated, opening his final page with surgeon-like care. "I overheard a phone call during one of the few visits we had. Mr. Wellington was talking about what to do with the kid once custody was granted." Dr. Mitchell leapt up. "Private conversations aren't admissible." "I have proof," David interrupted, pulling out a small recorder. "Ms. Rodriguez taught me the value of documenting evidence." The silence that followed was the loudest yet. And in that moment, Robert Wellington realized the unthinkable. He hadn't just underestimated a child. He had underestimated his own son. "This recording was made during Mr. Wellington's last visit to our apartment 6 months ago," David explained, his voice steady as ever. "He thought I was doing homework in my room. But the recorder was running in the living room." Judge Harrison took the device from David's outstretched hand and examined it with careful fingers. "David," he said, "are you absolutely certain you want this entered as evidence?" "Without a doubt, Your Honor." The judge pressed play, and a chilling stillness blanketed the room. Robert Wellington's voice crackled to life through the speakers, calm, calculated, cold. "Once I have legal custody, the boy goes straight to Riverside Military Academy. It's strict. They know how to handle difficult kids. He'll stay there until he's 18. Meanwhile, I get full access to the inheritance funds, educational expenses, of course." The second voice on the line was muffled and unintelligible. But Robert's next words stabbed the silence. "Exactly. $500 a month for the boarding. The rest is mine. He never needs to know about the money. It's the perfect setup. She's out of the picture. I look like a responsible father, and I get control." A gasp escaped from Janet's lips. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. She had never imagined Robert's intentions ran this deep, or this cruel. Dr. Mitchell sat stiff, color draining from his face. He had just watched his client detonate his own case. "There's more," David said calmly, and paused the tape. "This next part reveals how he truly sees me." He pressed play again. Robert's voice, now tinged with irritation. "The issue isn't just the money. It's the kid. He's too smart for his own good. Always asking questions. Always watching. Best to keep him out of the picture until he turns 18 and I can manage the financials. Kids like him, they get ideas. Above their station." Robert shot up from his chair. "This is entrapment. He baited me. He set me up. A 9-year-old can't." "A 9-year-old can't what?" David cut in, eyes burning with controlled fury. "Can't be intelligent? Can't protect himself? Can't expose the truth about a father who sees him as a problem to be locked away?" Judge Harrison switched off the recorder. His gaze locked on Robert like a vice. "Mr. Wellington," he said coldly, "this recording, combined with the financial records already presented, reveals a calculated attempt to manipulate the court, your son, and a legal trust. Your motivations are clear and unacceptable." A beat of silence. Then, "In light of this, permanent sole custody is awarded to Ms. Janet Thompson. All future claims by Mr. Wellington are barred. This hearing is concluded." The gavel came down like thunder. News of the boy who represented his mother in court, and won, spread like wildfire. Clips of David's testimony went viral. Cable news, online platforms, editorial columns. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But David stayed quiet, letting the court records speak. Within weeks, a major scholarship foundation announced a full ride in David's name to Harvard, pre-admitted for when he was ready. Another initiative, the David Thompson Library Project, was launched in partnership with several civil rights groups to fund libraries and debate clubs in underfunded schools across the country. Janet, now free from Robert's grasp, returned to her job and her son, this time truly safe. As for Robert Wellington, his reputation collapsed under the weight of his exposed intentions. His business ties severed, his name blacklisted. He quietly sold his estate and disappeared from the headlines, forgotten by all but his own silence. And David? He remained the same quiet, brilliant boy, except now, the world listened. He hadn't just fought for custody. He'd redefined what it meant to have a voice. If this story moved you, if a child's courage and a mother's fight for justice touched your heart, then don't scroll away. Backhand index pointing down, drop your thoughts in the comments. And hit subscribe for more powerful stories where truth, love, and justice collide.